The night sky above Earth was heavy with smoke and dust, far beyond the clouds. In the silence of space, a silver alien ship drifted into orbit. Its smooth surface reflected the faint glow of the ruined planet below. Inside the ship, an alien stood at the main viewing window, staring down with wide, unblinking eyes. The alien's name was Kale, a traveler from a faraway world where skies were clean, cities floated above the ground, and life was calm. Kale had crossed galaxies to see Earth with his own eyes. He had read reports, heard whispers, and studied images, but nothing prepared him for what he now saw from space. Earth did not look like the blue and green jewel it once was. It looked darker, colder, as if the planet itself had grown tired. Cities that should have been bright with life glowed only in scattered patches, surrounded by endless shadows. Fires burned faintly in places, sending smoke curling into the atmosphere. Kale pressed his hand against the glass. Strange world, he whispered to himself. The ship began its descent. Through thick clouds, the city came into view. Tall towers reached into the sky, but many were cracked, broken, or leaning dangerously. Neon lights still glowed on some of the buildings, but they flickered weakly, as if about to die at any moment. The streets below were wide, but they looked empty, filled only with mist and drifting pieces of debris. The sound of engines echoed as the ship lowered itself into the heart of the city. The landing was soft, yet the ground shook slightly, disturbing. Loose dust that rose in the air like smoke. Kale stepped to the airlock. He wore no helmet, for his body could survive many environments. As the doors slid open, a blast of warm, polluted air rushed inside. It carried a strange mix of smells: burning metal, rotting food, oil, and smoke. Kale stepped out. His tall frame stood against the ruined skyline, his eyes glowing faintly as he looked around. The city was silent. No birds sang, no music played. Only the distant hum of broken machines filled the air. Somewhere far off, a neon sign crackled and sparked, its letters half-broken, unreadable. Kale walked forward slowly. His boots touched cracked pavement that had once been smooth roads. Rusted cars sat abandoned on the sides, their windows shattered, their frames covered in dust. He paused beside one and placed his hand on the metal. It crumbled slightly under his touch, as if it had been left for centuries. He turned his gaze upward. Towers of steel and glass loomed above him, but many windows were dark. The ones that still glowed showed shadows moving behind them. Kale narrowed. His eyes, were those humans? Were they watching him? The silence made him uneasy. His world was always filled with voices, laughter, and the sound of life. Here, every noise was sharp and lonely. Even the wind felt strange, carrying with it whispers of sorrow. As Kale walked deeper into the city, he felt as though the buildings themselves were watching him, leaning closer with each step. Sparks dripped from cables overhead, landing near his feet with sharp crackles. The smell of burnt plastic filled his lungs, making him cough softly. He whispered again, "How can anyone live here?" But he pressed forward. In the distance, he saw a broken marketplace. Once, it must have been alive with trade and chatter. Now it was nothing more than empty stalls, half collapsed under their own weight. Signs hung crookedly, some with letters missing, some coated in dust so thick they were unreadable. A single neon board flickered with the word "open," though nothing inside was alive. Kale felt a deep chill in his chest. This city was not just broken, it was suffering. Suddenly, a sound cut through the silence, a loud metallic clang echoing from somewhere down the street. Kale froze. His eyes scanned the shadows, but nothing moved. The sound came again, sharper this time, like metal striking stone. He tensed. His kind were explorers, not warriors. He had not come here to fight, yet. His body prepared itself for danger. Slowly, carefully, he stepped into the alley where the sound had come from. The alley was narrow and dark, filled with trash and broken glass. A soft mist clung to the ground. Kale's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light as he walked forward. Then, he saw it. Not a human, not a machine, just a piece of broken metal swinging in the wind, tied to a cable overhead. Each time it moved, it struck the wall, creating the sound that had startled him. Kale let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Still, the tension in his body remained. This city was a place of illusions, a place where danger might hide behind every shadow. He stepped out of the alley and back onto the main road. The silence returned. The mist curled around him like cold fingers. He lifted his eyes to the towering skyline again, and for a moment, he thought he saw faces in the windows, watching, waiting, silent. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried in the still air. "I don't understand how anyone can live here." And with that, Cale moved deeper into the heart of the city, each step pulling him closer to the secrets that Earth still held. The city stretched before Cale like a maze of shadows and flickering lights. Every step carried him deeper into its heart, and with each moment, the alien felt the weight of silence pressing against his chest. His world had always been filled with balance and harmony, but here nothing seemed balanced. Every sound was sharp, every shadow alive, and every broken corner seemed ready to reveal something new. Cale stopped at the edge of a cracked bridge that spanned over a dried riverbed. The stone walls of the bridge were covered with strange marks, scratched into the surface by human hands. Some looked like names, others were only symbols, but all carried the same message: desperation. The alien touched one of the carvings with his long fingers, and the dust crumbled under his touch. A chill ran down his spine, not because of fear, but because he could feel the echo of human struggle in those simple scratches. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint sound of laughter. It was not warm or cheerful. It was short, strained, and mixed with coughs. Cale followed it carefully, his eyes narrowing against the mist that curled across the street like smoke. For a moment, he thought it might be an illusion again, another trick of the empty city, but then he saw them. Two figures appeared in the distance, walking slowly across the ruined street. They were human-thin, tired, and carrying heavy bags on their backs. Their clothes were worn and patched together with different fabrics, but their steps were steady. Cale froze, watching from the shadows. He expected them to look broken, afraid, but instead he saw something else in their faces: determination, even in their weakness. They did not seem defeated. The alien leaned against a wall, his heart racing. He had traveled countless worlds, seen species that built wonders beyond imagination, but never had he witnessed such a strange sight. How could these fragile creatures move so confidently through a world that seemed designed to crush them? The humans stopped at a collapsed building. With quick, practiced movements, they climbed over the rubble, their hands and feet moving with ease. One of them slipped, nearly falling, but the other reached out and pulled him back up. They said no words, yet their bond was clear. Cale's eyes widened as he realized they trusted each other completely, even in silence. The alien stepped closer, his curiosity burning stronger than his fear. His foot pressed against a loose piece of metal, and the sound echoed like thunder. In the stillness, the humans spun around instantly, their eyes sharp and alert. Cale froze, caught in their gaze. For a long moment, none of them moved. Then, one of the humans lifted a hand, not in anger, not in fear, but in warning, a silent gesture that said, "Stay back." Cale understood. He slowly lowered his head, stepping back into the mist. The humans did not chase him. Instead, they turned and continued on their way, disappearing into the ruins as if the city itself had swallowed them. Cale stood in place long after they were gone. His chest rose and fell with deep breaths, his mind racing, with thoughts he could not organize. They had seen him, yet they had not screamed or attacked. They had simply carried on, as if they had accepted the presence of something strange, because survival left no time for fear. The alien continued walking, each corner of the city revealing new mysteries. A broken park came into view, its trees dead, its benches broken. Yet in the center, Cale found small flowers growing through the cracks of the stone. They were fragile and pale, but they reached upward stubbornly toward the faint glow of the sky. Cale knelt beside them, his hand hovering above the petals. He whispered softly, "Life still fights here." A sudden rumble shook the ground. Cale turned sharply. From the shadows of another street, he saw a group of humans running, not calm like before, but desperate. Behind them, machines rolled forward, metal creatures with glowing red eyes and rusted claws. They chased the humans with sharp, grinding Sounds, their metal feet crushing the ground beneath them. Cale pressed himself against the wall, watching with wide eyes. The humans fought back, throwing stones, swinging pieces of pipe, and using whatever they could find. Their weapons were weak, yet their courage was strong. One human leapt onto a machine, smashing at its head until sparks flew. Another dragged a wounded friend to safety while others covered their retreat. The alien's heart pounded. He wanted to step out, to help, but his kind had rules: never interfere. Still, he could not look away. The scene was chaotic, violent, yet strangely beautiful. These humans, so fragile, fought with a fire he had never seen in any other species. Finally, the machines fell silent, broken and scattered across the ground. The humans gathered together, breathing heavily, some wounded but all alive. They looked at one another and gave quick nods, as if to say, "We made it." Then, without resting, they moved on again into the ruins. Cale stepped from the shadows once more, staring at the wreckage. Sparks rose from the broken machines, lighting his face with flickering orange light. He whispered again, his voice filled with disbelief. "How do they live like this?" The city did not answer. The wind carried only the distant echo of human footsteps fading deeper into the night. Cale stood alone, torn between fear and fascination, knowing he had only begun to uncover the truth of this strange world. The night grew deeper, yet the city never truly slept. Broken lights buzzed, sparks flickered, and the distant hum of machines echoed like a ghostly heartbeat. Cale moved carefully through the ruins, his glowing eyes scanning every shadow. He had already seen enough to fill his mind with questions, but one thought circled endlessly. How could humans survive in this? A sudden sound cut through the silence. It was not the harsh grind of metal, nor the empty crash of rubble falling. It was softer voices, real, human voices. Cale stopped, his long ears twitching. He pressed himself against the side of a ruined wall, listening. From the corner of a broken street, they appeared. A small group of humans, no more than 7 or 8, walked together in a tight circle. They carried lanterns cobbled together from scraps of glass and glowing wires. Their light painted their faces, revealing dirt, scars, and exhaustion. Yet, within those eyes, Cale saw something else: focus, strength, and an unshaken will. He watched them move. Their steps were cautious, but not slow. They were survivors, practiced in walking these streets without fear. 2 of them carried weapons, made from metal pipes, their ends sharpened to deadly points. A third held a small child's hand, guiding her gently, even as the ruins threatened to swallow them. The alien's chest tightened. He had expected broken, hopeless beings. Instead, he saw humans who carried themselves like warriors, even when the world around them had already fallen apart. Cale's boot shifted slightly on a piece of rubble, the crunch echoing louder than thunder in the silence. Instantly, every human turned. Lantern light swung toward him, flooding the dark corner where he hid. He froze. For a long moment, alien and human stared at one another. The humans reacted first. One man stepped forward, his weapon raised. His voice was rough, heavy with suspicion. "Who's there?" Cale raised his hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. His voice, calm yet echoing with an unearthly tone, answered, "I do not wish to fight." The group tightened, ready to defend, but the child spoke softly before anyone else could. "He's different." Her small voice broke the tension like a spark in the dark. All eyes turned to her, then back to Cale. The alien stepped into the lantern light. His tall figure, glowing eyes, and pale skin shimmered in the mist. The humans gasped, some stepping back, others gripping their weapons tighter. Cale bowed his head slightly. "I came here to see, to understand." For a long silence, no one moved. Then the man with the pipe lowered it just a fraction. His voice was cautious but curious. "You're not one of us, no," Cale admitted. "But I have seen much tonight, and I cannot understand how you live here." The humans exchanged glances. Some were still suspicious, others simply tired. Finally, the man lowered his weapon completely. "Because we have no choice," he said, "and because this is what we do. We live." Cale's eyes widened. There was no pride in the man's words, no arrogance, just truth. Simple, heavy truth. the group began to move again, and Kale found himself following at a distance. They did not invite him, nor did they chase him away. It was as if his presence had become part of their silent march. He watched them closely, noting every action. When the child stumbled, two hands reached to lift her. When an old woman coughed, another passed her a cloth. Even in ruin, even in danger, they carried each other. The deeper they walked into the city, the more Kale saw its horrors. Streets filled with burned-out cars, buildings that leaned so far they seemed ready to collapse with one more breath of wind. The smell of smoke and rust clung to everything. Yet the humans moved through it all with steady steps, as if these ruins were not a prison, but a battlefield they had already claimed as their own. Suddenly, a sharp noise ripped through the night. Not human, not natural, a mechanical screech that shook the ground. The humans stopped instantly, lanterns dimmed. Kale felt his own body tense. From the end of the street, shapes emerged, machines, hunting units with glowing red eyes and heavy claws dragging against the pavement. The humans sprang into action, without panic, without hesitation. They split into pairs, hiding behind rubble, drawing weapons, and preparing to fight. The child was pulled into safety, guarded by two adults. Kel's chest pounded as he watched. This was not fear. This was survival perfected. The machines attacked with brutal force, claws slashing, metal echoing against stone. The humans met them head-on. Pipes struck sparks against armored frames. Molotov flames burst in the dark, lighting the night with fire. One human climbed a machine's back, stabbing at its joints until it fell, screeching. Another threw himself into danger to drag his wounded friend away. Kale could not move. His kind were explorers, not fighters, but his eyes could not leave the scene. Fragile, small, broken in body, yet these humans fought as though their spirits were unbreakable. When the battle ended, the street was filled with smoke and silence. The machines lay in pieces, glowing faintly as their red eyes dimmed to black. The humans stood, some bleeding, some coughing, but all alive. One of them looked at Kale directly. His voice was steady, though his face was tired. "Now you see, we don't live here because it is easy. We live here because we refuse to die." Kel's breath caught. The words struck him harder than any weapon. He stared at them, stunned, his heart pounding with a strange mix of fear and respect. The humans moved on, their lanterns flickering into the mist. Kale followed slowly, whispering to himself, "I don't understand, but perhaps one day I will." The ruins of the city stretched endlessly, and Kale followed the small band of humans deeper into its heart. The smoke in the air grew heavier, pressing down on every breath. Yet the humans did not slow. Their lanterns flickered weakly, casting trembling light across shattered walls and fallen steel beams. Kale walked in silence, keeping his distance, but every step pulled him further into their world. The humans moved like shadows, quick and cautious. Kale could see their habits were born from years of survival. Every corner they passed, they checked. Every open street, they crossed swiftly, never lingering in the open. Even the child, though small and fragile, seemed trained in silence, her eyes wide and sharp as she clutched her guardian's hand. The alien studied them carefully. Their bodies were thin, their clothes torn and patched, but something burned inside them, a fire that refused to die. He could not understand it, yet he could not look away. They stopped suddenly near what once had been a large plaza. Statues lay broken on the ground, their faces lost to time. A fountain stood in the center, dry and filled with rubble. Round it, makeshift tents had been built from scraps of cloth and bent metal. Kale realized this was a camp, a human settlement hidden among the ruins. More figures stepped out from the shadows, men, women, even children. Their eyes fell instantly on Kale. Some gasped, some reached for weapons, others simply stared. Kale stood still, raising his hands to show he carried no threat. The leader of the group, a tall man with tired eyes and a scar running across his cheek, stepped forward. His voice was steady, though heavy with suspicion. "Who are you? Why are you here?" Kale spoke softly. "I am a traveler. I came to see, to understand." Murmurs rippled through the humans. A few laughed bitterly, others muttered angrily. The scarred man's eyes narrowed. Understand? There's nothing here to understand, only survival. Kel's gaze swept across the camp. People worked with quiet urgency repairing broken weapons, boiling what little food they had, tending to the wounded. Children huddled close to their parents, clutching ragged toys carved from wood. The air carried no joy, only struggle. Yet, beneath that struggle, Cale felt something powerful, a bond. He whispered, almost to himself, "Still, you endure." The scarred man studied him, then turned away. "We endure because we must, not because we want to." That night, Cale remained at the edge of the camp. He watched as the humans prepared their meager meals, shared water in cracked cups, and spoke in hushed voices. He watched a mother cradle her child close, whispering a lullaby that rose faintly above the noise of the city. For the first time, Cale felt something stir in his chest, not fear, not confusion, something else. Respect. The peace did not last. A sudden alarm echoed through the plaza. Humans leapt to their feet, weapons in hand. Cale's head snapped toward the edge of the ruins where glowing red lights pierced the darkness. Machines, a hunting pack, larger than before, rolling forward with heavy claws and shrill metallic cries. The humans rushed into formation. Pipes, blades, and makeshift bows were raised. Cale felt his chest tighten as he saw the child pulled back, hidden inside one of the tents. The scarred man barked orders, his voice steady despite the danger. The machines struck fast. Their claws tore through tents, their metal bodies smashing into walls. Sparks flew as humans met them head-on. Cale stood frozen at first, watching the chaos unfold. The humans fought with everything they had. A young woman leapt onto a machine's back, stabbing at its joints until it collapsed in a shower of sparks. An old man hurled a burning torch into the wires of another, setting it aflame or still. The machines were powerful. Cale's hands trembled. His mind screamed to obey his people's rules, never interfere, never take sides. Yet his heart pounded as he saw the scarred man knocked to the ground, his weapon torn from his grip. A machine raised its claw to strike him down. Cale moved. With a burst of energy, he threw himself forward, his alien strength slamming into the machine. Metal screeched as he tore its arm free, sparks showering the ground. The humans gasped in shock, but there was no time to question. Cale turned, ripping through another machine with strength his kind rarely revealed. The battle was brutal, but together alien and human they broke the machines apart. When the final one collapsed, silence fell once more. The camp was scarred, tents burned, people wounded, but they were alive. Cale stood among them, his chest rising and falling, smoke clinging to his skin. Human eyes locked onto him, somewhere. Afraid, others awed. The scarred man pulled himself to his feet, staring hard at Cale. "You fought," he said simply. Cale nodded. "I could not watch and do nothing." The man's expression softened, just slightly. "Then maybe you are not so different from us." The words struck Cale deeply. For the first time, he felt a bridge forming between himself and these humans. Not of blood, not of world, but of struggle. As the night settled again, Cale sat at the edge of the camp, watching fires burn low. The humans tended to their wounded, shared what little they had left, and whispered stories to their children. Cale looked at them, his voice low, his heart heavy with awe. "I still do not understand how anyone can live here," he whispered. "But perhaps that is why you are stronger than I ever imagined." The city groaned around them, broken yet alive. The humans endured, and now Cale had begun to understand why. The fires from the broken machines still glowed faintly in the plaza. Smoke curled upward in thin lines, carrying the sharp smell of burnt metal. Cale stood quietly among the humans, his tall frame rising above them, yet he felt smaller than ever before. The battle had ended, but the echo of screams and the crash of steel lingered in his mind. He had stepped into their fight, and now there was no turning back. The scarred man approached him again. His voice was low, steady, the voice of someone used to leading in impossible circumstances. "You fought with us," he said. There was no anger in his tone now, no suspicion, only curiosity. "Why?" Cale hesitated. His people did not interfere. They observed, they recorded, they passed judgment from a distance. But as he looked around at the wounded being treated by trembling hands, at the children holding on to their mothers, at the exhausted faces of men and women who refused to collapse, he felt an answer rising in his chest. "I could not watch and do nothing," he said. His voice was calm, but there was weight in it, as though he himself could barely believe the choice he had made. The scarred man studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then you may stay here tonight." He turned away to help his people, leaving Cale with those words hanging heavy in the smoky air. Cale moved slowly through the camp. Everywhere he looked, there were signs of hardship: bandages torn from old cloth, water shared from broken bottles, food divided into portions so small they looked like crumbs. Yet no one complained. No one cried out in despair. Instead, they worked together with quiet determination, each person doing their part to keep the others alive. He stopped when he saw a boy no older than 12 carrying a bundle of wood for the fires. His arms shook under the weight, but his jaw was set firmly. Cale bent down and took half the load without a word. The boy looked up at him with wide, startled eyes, then gave a small nod of thanks before continuing on his way. The alien felt something stir inside him. In his world, children were protected, kept away from hardship. Here, even the youngest carried burdens, and they did so without hesitation. It unsettled him, yet it also amazed him later. As the camp grew quiet, Cale found himself sitting near the scarred man again. The leader was sharpening a piece of metal into a blade, his movements precise and practiced. He did not look at Cale when he spoke. "You asked earlier how we live here." His voice was rough, worn from years of shouting commands and warnings. "The truth is simple. We don't live because it is easy. We live because we refuse to give up." Cale turned his head slowly, his glowing eyes fixed on the man. "But why? What makes you fight when the world around you is broken?" The man paused, the blade catching the light of the fire. "Because if we stop, we lose everything. Not just our lives, but our history, our families, our children. We fight because there is no other choice." Cale absorbed the words in silence. He had traveled across stars, studied civilizations that had risen and fallen, but never had he heard something so raw, so simple, and yet so powerful. The child he had seen earlier came closer, clutching a small wooden figure in her hands. She looked at Cale with wide eyes, unafraid now. "Are you going to stay?" she asked softly. Cale opened his mouth, but no words came. He was not supposed to stay. His mission was only to observe. Yet as he looked at her, at the fragile toy she held as if it were a treasure, he realized he wanted to stay, at least long enough to understand more. "I will," he finally said. The child smiled faintly and sat down beside him, humming a quiet tune. Cale listened, his chest tightening. It was not a song of joy, but of hope, fragile and trembling like the flowers he had seen pushing through cracks in stone. As the night deepened, Cale lay awake, his eyes fixed on the ruined skyline. The humans slept lightly, weapons close at hand, as if danger might strike at any moment. Cale wondered what it would feel like to live every day with such fear. But then he thought of the way they fought, the way they carried one another, and he realized it was not fear that defined them. It was resilience. The next morning, the camp stirred to life with the weak light of dawn. Smoke hung low in the streets, and the air was heavy with dust. Cale rose and walked with the scarred man as he gave orders. Scouts were sent to check the roads, others prepared to gather supplies, and a small group was tasked with repairing the camp's defenses. Cale turned to him and asked, "Every day you do this, every day you fight. But how long can you continue?" The man stopped, his tired eyes meeting Cale's. "As long as we breathe," he answered simply. Cale's gaze drifted across the camp. He saw the boy with the wood again, the mother cradling her child, the wounded binding their injuries and rising to continue the work. He felt the weight of the man's words sink into him like stone. He whispered softly, more to himself than to anyone else, "I don't understand how anyone can live here." But as the humans moved around him, unbroken despite the ruins, Cale realized the truth was forming inside him, piece by piece. They did not just live here, they endured, they adapted, and they refused to fall. And in that refusal, they had become something more powerful than he had ever known. The sun rose weakly over the broken skyline. Its light filtered through a thick curtain of smoke. The city looked no brighter in the day than it had in the night. Buildings still leaned against one another like wounded giants, and the streets were still choked with dust and rubble. Yet, in the middle of all this ruin, the humans stirred with quiet energy. Kale stood among them, watching as life began again. There was no morning song, no feast, no moment of ease. Instead, people rose from ragged blankets and immediately turned to their tasks. Some prepared what little food they had. Others checked weapons and repaired lanterns, while the youngest helped gather water from cracked pipes that dripped faintly in the corners of the plaza. Every movement was purposeful, every hand doing something to keep the group alive. Kel's eyes followed a woman who carried a bucket half her own size. Her face was lined with dirt, but her steps were steady, her eyes determined. He watched a man with a missing arm sit quietly as a boy wrapped his wound again with strips of cloth. No one complained, no one demanded pity. They simply endured. He could not stop the words from escaping his lips. They should not survive this, and yet they do. The scarred leader joined him, his voice low but firm. That is humanity. Broken ground, empty skies, and endless struggle, and still we rise, always. Kale turned to him. But why not leave? Why not abandon this place and search for a better home? The man shook his head slowly. This is our home. It may be shattered, but it is ours. We don't leave what is ours behind. Even if the world crumbles, we stand on its bones. Kel's mind struggled with the idea. In his world, survival meant leaving weakness behind, moving to safer lands, never wasting energy on hopeless causes. But here, humans clung to their ruined world as though it was sacred. It confused him, but it also pulled at something deep inside. Later that day, Kale followed a small group of humans beyond the plaza. They moved carefully, searching the streets for supplies. Kale saw how they scavenged every scrap of metal, every shard of glass, every drop of water, turning ruin into resource. When danger rose, a collapsing wall, a sudden machine noise, they shielded one another without hesitation. In one ruined street, Kale saw a child laugh. The sound startled him more than any machine scream. It was light, fragile, but real. The child had found a small piece of colored glass and held it up to the weak sunlight, smiling at the way it sparkled. Around her, the adults smiled too, their tired faces softening for a moment. Kale felt something stir in his chest. How? He whispered. How can they laugh here? The scarred man, walking beside him, answered. Because if we forget how to laugh, then we are already dead. The words struck Kale harder than any weapon. He looked again at the child, her laughter ringing out in a place that should have killed all joy long ago. It was then he began to understand. Humanity did not survive because they were stronger in body. They survived because their spirits refused to bend. That night, the camp gathered around small fires. Food was scarce, yet they shared it evenly. Kale sat at the edge, silent, listening as humans told stories of what life had been before. They spoke of green fields, of oceans that stretched wide and free, of skies without smoke. Their voices were filled with longing, but also with hope. The children listened with wide eyes, as if those stories were treasures more valuable than any scrap of food. Kale realized then that humans carried their past like a weapon. Memories kept them alive, dreams gave them strength, and stories bound them together. Even in ruin, they were more than survivors. They were builders of meaning in a world that had lost it. As the firelight flickered, the scarred man turned to Kale again. Do you see now? This is what it means to be human. We are not strong because our world is kind. We are strong because it is cruel. Kel's eyes glowed faintly in the dark. You suffer more than any people I have known, and yet you endure. You endure, and somehow you shine. The man gave a tired smile. That is the lesson. Pain breaks some. For us, it forges. Kale sat in silence, the weight of those words pressing deep into him. For the first time, he felt a spark of understanding. Humanity's power did not come from their bodies or their weapons. It came from their refusal to bow, their ability to find hope even in ashes. As the night grew quiet, Kale rose and looked out across the ruined city. Smoke curled around the towers, and the sky was black with scars. But beneath it, in the heart of ruin, small fires glowed, flickering against the darkness. Fires of defiance, fires of hope. He whispered softly, his voice carried by the wind. Perhaps this is how they live here, not because they can, but because they must. And for the first time, the alien felt a strange respect fill him, not just for the humans before him, but for humanity itself. The night slowly gave way to a pale and broken dawn. The sun struggled to pierce the thick curtain of smoke that hung over the ruined city, and when its light finally fell on the shattered towers, it revealed scars that had no end. Cale stood at the edge of the camp, watching the horizon. The world looked lifeless, yet behind him, the humans stirred once more, rising to face another day. He turned his gaze back to them. Fires were low, food was scarce, yet the camp was alive. Children whispered softly to one another. Mothers wrapped thin blankets around their shoulders. Men and women sharpened weapons made of scrap metal. There was no celebration, no cheer, but there was purpose. Every face carried the same message: survive. Cale could not look away. He had seen worlds collapse before, seen species vanish when their homes grew to harsh, yet here, humans clung to life with a ferocity that defied reason. He felt the weight of his earlier words echo inside him. I don't understand how anyone can live here. But now, those words no longer carried confusion alone. They carried awe. The scarred man joined him at the camp's edge. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with something unbreakable. You've seen enough now to know what we are, he said. Cale turned to him slowly. I have seen your city. I have seen your battles. I have seen your pain, and still you endure. I do not. I cannot understand how. The man gave a tired smile. That is because you come from a world where life is easy. Strength means little until it is tested. Here, every day tests us, and every day we choose to rise again. Cale lowered his eyes, thoughtful. In his world, survival was simple. Their skies were clear, their cities safe, struggle was rare, and life moved without resistance. But here, struggle was constant, and yet, humans carried it like a crown. Suddenly, a cry rang out from the plaza. A scout had returned, his clothes torn, his face pale. He stumbled forward, shouting breathlessly. Machines, more of them, coming this way. The camp erupted in motion. Weapons were lifted. Supplies gathered. Children pulled close to their parents. Cale stood frozen as the scarred man barked orders, calm even in the face of disaster. Form the barricade. Protect the weak. We stand, or we die here. Cale's chest tightened. His people would never have chosen this. They would have fled, abandoned the broken, left the weak behind. But here, not one human moved to run. Every person, from the youngest to the oldest, stood together, preparing to face the storm. The ground trembled with the approach of the machines. Red eyes glowed in the mist. Claws clanged against stone, and the air filled with the metallic roar of their hunt. Cale's hands trembled as he watched. The child he had spoken to clutched her toy tightly, her eyes wide, but not filled with tears. The machines poured into the street, towering over the barricade. Sparks lit the air as the first clash began. Humans hurled fire, struck with pipes, swung with blades. Metal screamed, bodies crashed, but the line held. Cale's heart pounded, and then he moved. With a roar he did not know he could make, he hurled himself into the fight. His strength tore through steel. His hands ripped claws from sockets. His body became a weapon. Beside him, humans fought with equal fury, their cries filling the smoke-filled air. Together, alien and human, they pushed back the tide. The battle raged until the machines lay broken, their glowing eyes dimmed to nothing. Silence followed, heavy and complete. The humans stood among the wreckage, battered, bleeding, but alive. Cale's chest heaved. His body trembled with exhaustion, yet his mind burned with a fire he had never known. He looked at the scarred man, who stood tall despite his wounds. You asked how we live here, the man said, his voice raw but strong. Now you see, we live because we refuse to die. We live because this is who we are. Cale's glowing eyes softened. He turned his gaze across the camp, across the faces of men, women, and children who had survived yet another impossible night. He felt the truth settle deep inside him, heavy and undeniable. He whispered the words once more, but this time they carried new meaning. I don't understand how anyone can live here, and yet, perhaps that is what makes you the most extraordinary. Of all, the humans began to rebuild their barricade, already preparing for the next fight. Their hands were tired, their bodies broken, but not one of them stopped. Kale stood in the middle of it all, no longer only an observer. He felt something shift inside him, a respect so deep it bordered on reverence. As the dawn grew brighter, the alien looked once more at the ruined city. It was still broken, still scarred, but now he saw it differently, not as a graveyard, but as proof of a species that would not surrender, proof of a people who rose even when the world tried to bury them. And in that moment, Kale knew the truth of humanity. They did not survive because they were the strongest. They survived because they refused to be broken. The alien turned his eyes to the horizon, whispering softly, "This is your power. Not your weapons, not your walls, but your will." The humans moved around him, rebuilding, fighting, laughing faintly in the face of ruin. And for the first time, Kale felt no confusion, no disbelief, only awe.